The dog had once been playful, alert, and full of life, but sickness changes everything. On a cold, dusty morning at the edge of the city, a middle-aged woman dragged the weak dog by a fraying rope. Her face showed irritation, not sadness. Neighbors had warned her for days that the dog needed medical care, but treatment cost money and patience. She had neither. "This is the end for you," she muttered, tying the rope loosely to a broken cart near a pile of garbage. The smell of rotting waste filled the air. Flies buzzed loudly. Without looking back, she walked away, convincing herself that nature would take its course. The dog tried to stand. His legs trembled violently, and he collapsed again. His breathing was shallow, each breath a struggle. His eyes searched the road endlessly, as if hoping his owner would return. She never did. A few minutes later, a small puppy appeared from between the houses. He was barely a few months old, thin, dusty, but curious. This puppy had often followed the older dog around the neighborhood, learning how to survive by watching him. When the puppy saw the dog lying near the garbage, his tail wagged at first. He ran closer, licking the dog's face gently, whining softly. But the dog didn't respond. He didn't lift his head. He barely moved. The puppy tried again. He barked, he nudged, he pulled at the rope with his tiny teeth. Nothing worked. Confusion turned into panic. The puppy looked toward the busy road. Cars passed, people walked by. Some noticed the scene, but quickly looked away. Others didn't notice at all. Hunger, work, and personal worries kept them moving forward. Suddenly, the puppy made a decision no one expected. He ran toward the road. Standing on the edge of traffic, the puppy barked desperately at strangers. His small voice was almost lost in the noise of engines and horns. A man kicked dust near him to scare him away. A woman pulled her child closer and crossed the street. No one stopped. After hours of trying, exhausted and defeated, the puppy slowly walked back toward the garbage pile. That's when fate shifted. Near the dumpsters, a thin old beggar was collecting plastic bottles and scrap metal. His clothes were torn, his beard untrimmed, and his hands rough from years of labor. As he filled his sack, he noticed the puppy standing still, staring at him with eyes full of fear and urgency. The beggar frowned. "Why are you looking at me like that, little one?" he whispered. The puppy turned, walked a few steps, then stopped and looked back, waiting. The beggar hesitated, then followed. And what he was about to see would change all their lives forever. What will the beggar discover near the garbage pile? And will he choose to walk away like everyone else, or do the unthinkable? The beggar followed the puppy slowly, his sack of plastic bottles dragging behind him. Every few steps, the puppy stopped and looked back, making sure the old man was still there. There was urgency in the puppy's movements, something between fear and hope. As they reached the garbage pile, the smell hit first. The beggar covered his nose instinctively. Then he saw the dog. The animal lay motionless near the broken cart, ribs visible, eyes half open. His chest rose and fell unevenly. For a moment, the beggar assumed the dog was already dead. He sighed deeply. "Another soul left behind," he murmured. Just as he was about to turn away, the puppy ran to the dog and placed his tiny head on the dog's chest, whining softly. The dog's tail twitched just slightly. The beggar froze. "He's alive," the beggar whispered, surprised. He crouched down despite the filth around him. Gently, he placed 2 fingers near the dog's nose. A faint breath touched his skin. The beggar closed his eyes for a second, as if battling an internal war.
He had no home, no steady food, no money for himself, let alone a sick animal. "Why did you bring me here?" he asked the puppy quietly. "I have nothing." The puppy looked up at him, eyes shining, and let out a soft bark. It wasn't loud, it wasn't demanding, it sounded like a request. The beggar's hands trembled. Memories flooded his mind, being ignored on streets, people stepping over him, treated as invisible. He looked at the dog again, abandoned, weak, unwanted. "I know this pain," he said softly. Slowly, carefully, he untied the rope from the cart. The dog whimpered as the beggar slid his arms underneath him. The animal was heavier than he expected, and lifting him sent a sharp pain through the beggar's back. People passing by stopped briefly. "Why bother?" one man scoffed. "It's just a stray," another said. The beggar ignored them. With the puppy walking beside him, he carried the dog through narrow streets until they reached a small old veterinary clinic at the corner of the market. The signboard was faded, and the building looked forgotten, much like the beggar himself. Inside, the doctor examined the dog and shook his head. "He's badly infected, malnourished. Treatment is possible," the doctor said, pausing, "but it won't be cheap." The beggar swallowed hard. "How much?" he asked. The amount felt like a mountain crashing down on him. He reached into his pocket and placed a few coins on the table, everything he had earned that day. The doctor looked at the coins, then at the beggar's face. "This isn't enough," the doctor said, honestly. The beggar nodded slowly. "Then give me time," he replied. "I'll find a way." As he stepped back outside with the puppy, uncertainty filled his chest, but so did determination. Because once you choose compassion, turning back is no longer an option. How will a man who owns nothing find the money to save a dying dog, and what sacrifice will it demand from him?
That night, the beggar sat outside an abandoned shop with the puppy curled beside him. The city moved on as usual. Lights flashing, people laughing, vendors closing stalls. But inside the old man's chest, a storm raged. The doctor's words echoed in his mind. "Treatment is possible, but it won't be cheap." He opened his sack and emptied it onto the ground. Plastic bottles, scrap wire, bent metal pieces. This was his daily survival. He stared at the pile as if it might suddenly turn into money. "It's not enough," he whispered. The puppy rested his head on the beggar's knee, trusting, silent. Somewhere in the clinic, the sick dog lay fighting for every breath. The beggar clenched his fists. At dawn, he made a decision. The beggar walked through the narrow lanes to a small second-hand market. He stopped at a stall run by a gruff merchant who dealt in used goods. Slowly, painfully, the beggar removed a worn wristwatch from his pocket. It was old, scratched, barely working, but it was the last thing his late wife had given him. "This is all I have of value," the beggar said quietly. The merchant examined it and shrugged. "It's not worth much." "I don't need much, just enough to save a life." After a long pause, the merchant handed him a few bills. The beggar closed his eyes for a brief moment before taking the money, as if saying goodbye to a piece of his past. Without wasting time, he rushed back to the clinic. The doctor looked surprised when the beggar placed the money on the counter. "You came back," the doctor said. "I promised," the beggar replied. The treatment began immediately. Medicines were given, fluids were attached. The dog whimpered weakly, but his breathing slowly steadied. The puppy sat near the door, watching every movement, tail still. Hours passed. Finally, the doctor removed his gloves. "He's stable for now," he said. "The next few days are critical." The beggar exhaled deeply, as if he'd been holding his breath for years. For the next several days, the beggar returned again and again.
He skipped meals, walked longer hours collecting scrap, slept less. Every coin went toward medicine and food for the dogs before himself. Some days, hope felt fragile. Then, one morning, as sunlight spilled through the clinic window, the sick dog slowly lifted his head for the first time. His eyes met the beggar's. The puppy barked excitedly, jumping in circles. The beggar smiled through tears. "You're still with us," he whispered. He walked out of the clinic that afternoon lighter than he'd felt in years, not richer, not stronger, but fuller. On the way back, passing a small roadside stall, his eyes fell on something colorful hanging from a string, a lottery ticket. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket. Was this just a careless purchase, or the moment destiny decided to repay a selfless heart? The beggar stood in front of the small stall for a long moment, staring at the lottery ticket swaying gently in the breeze. He had never believed in luck. Life had taught him that survival came from effort, not miracles. Still, something inside him whispered, "Just this once." He bought a single ticket, nothing fancy, no big hopes attached. "Dreams are free," the vendor joked. The beggar smiled faintly and walked away. Days passed. The dog grew stronger with each visit. His appetite returned. His tail wagged again. The puppy never left his side, as if guarding a treasure he had almost lost. The beggar continued his routine, collecting scrap, selling plastic, sleeping wherever he could. Life remained hard, but it felt lighter now. One afternoon, as the beggar passed by the same stall, a crowd had gathered. People were shouting, laughing, checking numbers. A poster on the wall read, "Winning lottery numbers announced today." The beggar stopped. He pulled the folded ticket from his pocket, creased, slightly torn. His hands shook as he compared the numbers. Once, twice. Then he froze. Every number matched. His breath caught in his throat. The noise around him faded. "This can't be," he whispered. The vendor grabbed the ticket, checked again, and his eyes widened. "You've won," he said loudly. "This is the big prize." People turned. Some clapped. Some stared in disbelief. The beggar sank onto a nearby stool, overwhelmed. After years of being invisible, he was suddenly the center of attention. The money changed everything, but not the way people expected. The first place he went wasn't a bank or a fancy store. It was the veterinary clinic. The doctor stared as the beggar paid the full treatment cost and more. "For future care," the beggar said calmly. The dogs were fully healed within weeks. The older dog regained his strength. The puppy grew playful and bold. The beggar rented a small room nearby, clean and warm, where the three of them stayed together. News of the beggar's win spread fast. People who once ignored him now greeted him kindly. Some asked for help, some asked for money, but the beggar chose silence over pride. He invested carefully, started a small recycling business, and hired others like himself, people no one looked at twice. His life transformed, but his heart stayed the same. One evening, as the beggar passed the same garbage pile where it all began, he stopped. If the puppy hadn't asked for help, if he hadn't listened, some miracles arrived disguised as responsibility. But what happened to the woman who abandoned the dog, and will the beggar's past ever cross his new life again?
Time has a quiet way of bringing everything back around. Months passed, and the beggar, now known as Rahim by the people in the neighborhood, was no longer seen digging through garbage piles. His small recycling business had grown steadily. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. More importantly, it gave work to others who had once lived the same invisible life he had. In his modest home, the two dogs were no longer symbols of survival. They were family.
The older dog, now healthy and strong, guarded the doorway every night. The puppy had grown taller and more confident, often following Rahim like a shadow. One afternoon, while Rahim was overseeing his workers near the market, a familiar voice reached his ears. "Please, can you help me?" He turned. A tired woman stood there, her clothes worn, her face heavy with regret and stress. It took Rahim a moment, but then he recognized her. She was the same woman who had abandoned the dog months ago. Life had not been kind to her since. Job loss, debt, and illness had stripped away her arrogance. Rahim said nothing at first. Behind him, the older dog stepped forward. The woman froze, fear flashing across her face. She lowered her eyes, realizing exactly who he was. "I made a mistake," she said quietly. "I thought leaving him was easier. I was wrong." The crowd waited. Some expected anger. Some expected revenge. Rahim knelt and gently placed his hand on the dog's head. The dog didn't growl. He didn't step back either. "Pain teaches lessons in different ways," Rahim said calmly, "but compassion decides who we become." Instead of turning her away, Rahim offered her work, simple, honest labor, no lectures, no insults. The woman broke down in tears. That evening, as Rahim walked home with the dogs, the puppy ran ahead, tail wagging wildly. Rahim looked up at the sky and smiled. He had once believed the world only took from people like him. He had been wrong. Sometimes the smallest act of kindness plants a seed so powerful that it changes lives, human and animal alike. And it all began with a puppy brave enough to ask for help and a man humble enough to answer.